Good.
Good.
We ready to start?
I think we are good to go. I think your first appointment is already here.
Okay. Let me go ahead and declare this meeting open. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Board of Selectmen is being conducted with remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice that was posted on the town's website. So with that introduction, I hereby declare the March 31st session of the Medfield Board of Selectmen's meeting open. I would remind people who are participating in this meeting that the meeting is being recorded and will be streamed out on Medfield TV. Would also like to take a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. And I might point out, I gather that the aircraft carrier Teddy Roosevelt right now has a COVID outbreak, apparently off the coast of Guam. So even people in the military are dealing not just with defense issues, but with health issues that we're all facing. I would also, in particular, at tonight's meeting, like to recognize the first responders who are fighting in a number of different ways to try to protect the public and to overcome the health threats that we have. I think as you watch some of the shows and interviews of people who are first responders, it hits home that many of them are deciding to deliberately expose themselves to a virus, knowing full well that they have families at home, knowing that there are other first responders who have been infected with the virus, and yet they still show up. And I think we should acknowledge that. And on a lighter note, but not a totally light note, I would also like to acknowledge our high school students here in town. Christine forwarded the Fox 25 story of the students. As from the interviews, it would appear they're mostly seniors. For sure, they're all old. Well, the ones that were interviewed or covered by the show were old enough to drive cars, so we know that much. They have shown a degree of maturity that I don't know any town has an automatic right to respect from its high school students, especially those who are about to graduate from high school and are being told that they need to stay cooped up for the foreseeable future, just in the months leading up to the graduation. I was just impressed at how they've dealt with that, how maturely they've dealt with it without giving into it totally and giving up. And I'd just like to acknowledge that and send my respect and admiration out to all of them.
Us, the Julia Farrell, who was the one wearing the sunglasses.
Yep.
She actually was the young woman who was going to run the walk on May 3rd. That's no longer going to happen, to raise awareness for mental health in town. Yep. She's a very competent young lady.
Everyone that I saw interviewed, they were all impressed. I was just impressed. Takes a lot of maturity. You don't always find that kind of maturity in high school kids. I just was impressed with it, and just want to acknowledge it. Our first appointment is with a number of people who I think are here: Evan Weisenfeld, Abby Marble, Kathy Thompson, and Georgia Kalibas. I think this may have made the appointments because in last week's meeting, we were acknowledging the number of grassroots and independent efforts that were coming forward. And I found yet another one on the internet yesterday of people trying to reach out, provide opportunities for help. And I think what we were hoping to do is to get a better sense of how all these efforts come together and maybe make it easier for people to understand, the people in town who are inclined to contribute, help them better understand whether it doesn't matter who you send it to, or whether, depending on what your predispositions are, you might send it in one direction versus another. Let's see, how should we start this? Do any of you want to start talking about what's going on and help us better understand how everything integrates?
I can talk a little bit about the home committee. I don't know if everybody's aware of the home committee. It's very quietly run in town. It's definitely not new. It's been around since the 50s. It was initially started with a fire chief after people would have a fire in their home to help them replace what they needed to start their new house or wherever new household. It's gone on throughout the years doing different things. At one point, a big thing was Christmas. Every single child who was on the free or reduced lunch list or was identified by somebody in town as having a need would get a full wardrobe. That has morphed throughout the years due to some federal law changes where we can no longer release the list of free and reduced lunch. We used to have a local application, and we would ask on it, would you like to receive gifts from the home committee? Now it's a federal fund form, and we can no longer do that. So the home committee has switched its focus in the last couple of years as Medfield Youth Outreach has worked with the Medfield Angels to sort of provide a similar service. We had switched over from gifts to gift.
Kathy, we can't hear you.
Kathy, we lost your sound.
Now we've lost the
fulfill
video.
a lot of those needs. The Medfield Home Committee, instead of doing that, has switched over to doing camperships, and we do that by making a donation to MFI, and they provide those camperships to kids during the summer months, both small passes, as well as the park and rec camp in town. We also do fund other things when people are having, different needs. At one point, I know we paid for a very expensive pair of eyeglasses for a student when the Lions Club sort of ran out of their funding to do that. We've helped people with bills. We still do a lot for the seniors over the holidays, but they still get actual meals. We deliver poinsettias to anybody in town who has had a loss that year. And we don't do a lot of fundraising. There's one fundraiser that we do at Dale Street. The kids do like a flea market that raises $4,000 or $5,000 a year. But mostly we get donations from people. A lot of times you'll see in the paper obituaries that will have donations to the home committee. And that's where most of our funding comes from. We don't do a lot of open fundraising.
Okay, thanks, Kat.
And it's worked out well, our partnership with the Medfield Foundation, in that they work directly with Medfield Youth Outreach, and we're not making full decisions on who we're funding and who we're not funding. We're just making outright donations, and they're making those determinations. And they have more information to do that with.
Mm-hmm. Kathy, one quick question on the home committee. Who actually determines how to spend that money? Is there I guess I call it a governing board, but
there is a board, yes.
Okay.
Georgia Kalivas is on that board, and myself, as well as 4 community members.
Okay.
The fire chief in town was on it for many, many years.
Thanks.
And we're in a position now to, again, engage in a partnership with the Medfield Foundation and make just a financial donation to them.
Okay.
And as we've done with our camperships, I've talked to all the board members yesterday and thought that we'd make an initial donation of $10,000. And if more funding, depending on what the need is, we could talk about additional funding.
Okay.
Thinking that might be a good kickoff.
Okay. Where would we go? Maybe the Medfield Foundation next?
It would go to the Medfield Foundation, yeah.
Sure. Well, so first of all, on behalf of the Medfield Foundation, Kathleen, thank you for mentioning your donation, I know Abby and I would both be very excited that MFI and our sort of COVID relief fund would be able to use that money to support the community. Abby, I know you're on mute. If you want to sort of chime in, Abby and I are here representing the Medfield Foundation and sort of a broader approach to how we're looking to help people in town. As this crisis was developing, Abby and I talked about creating a Facebook group that could help inform people in town and provide a way to connect people who are willing to help with those people who need help. And so we created that, and quickly that grew. It's over 1,000 people now. I can't guarantee that they're all only from Medfield, but at least the information that we're sharing is, really in support of Medfield. And so we're doing a couple of different things. That is not an official, the Facebook group is not an official Medfield Foundation effort, though Abby and I are both Medfield Foundation board members. We are doing a lot to promote what Medfield Foundation is doing, but it's not exclusive to that. Anybody that is doing good things, we're trying to share that information so that people who are interested can have access to important announcements or ways to, solicit volunteers, or if somebody posts that they need help, then we have a way to do that. For example, somebody at one point posted that their mother needed to have some medication picked up at Shaw's. They were in Boston quarantined, and we were able to quickly find somebody who could go over, pick it up, and drop it off at the house, all without, any physical contact. So we're trying to find ways to do that. We are promoting other aspects within this sort of Facebook group, and that is people who are interested in making donations and people who are in need of some sort of financial support. For those who don't know sort of the history of Medfield Foundation, we've been around for almost 20 years now, and one of our big efforts is the annual Medfield Foundation Angel Run. And through the Angel Run, we raise money every year that goes back to help support people in the local community. We raise the money, but we work very closely with youth outreach, as well as Pastor Phil at the UCC Church, as social workers and community people who have a much closer feel for what the need is and make those sort of determinations on how best to spend the money. As MFI, we try to make sure that we raise the money and then we turn over the money to the experts and allow them to distribute that money. Through this new effort related to COVID-19, Abby and I talked, and we worked with the MFI board, and everybody agreed that we would put out a fundraising appeal to raise money for COVID relief as well. We're tracking that money separately. We are working through the same individuals at Medfield Youth Outreach and the UCC Church to decide how to evaluate those requests. We were concerned that there would be a large number of requests, so we created an online form that would capture the information and allow us to then filter it, make sure it was appropriate and relevant. If there was something that we could respond to somebody and say, well, this is more something for unemployment, here's a resource for you, or try to help direct them. And then everything else we would pass on to the committee to evaluate, and they would then make the determination and be in touch directly with the individuals. So that's what we're doing at a high level. We continue to
Evan, just one sec.
Yeah.
I just want to think, we've already received 7 financial requests for that since we started it, probably about, I'd say maybe 2.5 weeks ago. Time's kind of morphing for me. So I think we
it was
started
about that, yeah.
about 2.5 weeks ago. So 7 requests. I expect that once rent starts to become due and mortgages start to become due, we'll probably see a lot more than we've already seen. All right, sorry, Evan, just wanted to throw
That's
that in.
okay. I guess I would suggest for now, people who are not speaking to mute themselves. There's some background noise. Sounds like somebody in the kitchen, maybe. Anyway, thank you for that, Abby. I think part of what we're trying to do is make sure that we do a good job of raising those funds as a nonprofit entity. Donations are tax deductible. We have a history of doing this. We have the infrastructure in place to raise the money. We've already gotten a large number of donations from individuals of all sizes. Very excited to hear about the home committee willingness to donate. We've had some outreach from a couple of other individuals that are affiliated with a corporate entity that might be able to facilitate a donation on a matching grant. So there's definitely some opportunities coming so that we'll be able to support people in need in the community.
One of the benefits of working with Medfield Youth Outreach is they have 2 licensed social workers there, and they are able to tap into resources that Evan and I just really don't know about: fuel assistance. I mean, I'm very involved in the food cupboard, so of course I can always help in that way. But there are things that, we just, fortunately, we're in a very fortunate position that Evan and I have not had to delve into, all the resources that are needed. And Chelsea and Kathy are very well aware of the opportunities to create make their people's lives easier. And besides just the financial. So we felt it was very important that they be on part of the administrative of to be able to administer the funds.
And I guess the last thing I would say is if anybody's interested in learning more, we created a page on our website. It's medfieldfoundation.org/COVID-19. So if somebody wants to go to that, it summarizes what we're doing. And there are 2 buttons on the page, one to donate, one to request help. And so that would allow somebody very quickly and easily to do that. And we'll continue to put out information on our own social media channels, as well as the COVID-19 support group, and look to continue to do this for as long as is necessary.
Maybe I should add just a few comments on, because I think I'm the one who may have put this on, wound up having this get on the agenda. And Mike and Pete, I'm raising it, and I'm not trying to push a particular outcome. So I actually appreciate your thoughts and reactions as we have this conversation. The reason I raised the question last week, first off, this is not in any way, shape, or form either a magnifying glass on the operations that any of you have, and it is not intended in any way, shape, or form to suggest that there should be some sort of overarching control. So I'm not coming from that standpoint. What I initially was coming from the standpoint that I was saying, gosh, with this emergency, I ought to be looking at where I send money. And then and the first place I think about is our town. And then when as a potential donor, I looked at it and said, well, if I wanted to make the most rational decision for where I should send it, where would it go? And and I think probably what prompted it was the Medfield Foundation's COVID fund, coupled with the fact that I was reading other other messages from other groups or other people raising money for various things. So it's got nothing to do with you specifically. It has to do with the question, do we have a coherent, well, let me back off. Should we have a more coherent framework for making sure that people who need help can get help, and making sure that people who want to give help, and I guess I'm primarily thinking financial, or first and foremost financial, but then also other help. Are we organized in a voluntary way, as well as we ought to be, so that the help that some people are trying to provide, and the help that some people are trying to get, can be acquired or provided in a coherent, straightforward way that's understandable? So that's where I'm coming from. And to give you a further illustration, Evan, you talked about the site that you have where people can ask for help and get help. Just last night, I think Abby, I don't think this is the same thing, but I saw your name on it. There was a woman here in town who I gather took some sort of a templated help thing that can go on the internet. She posted it. I noticed only her name was the only one who had provided it. So I'm guessing she just posted it yesterday. But what I'm getting at is that's entirely separate and doing the same thing. Then you have some people who are volunteering on one site, maybe not being able to match up with somebody who could use help on the other site because there's too many different sites for people to do one thing or the other, and we're not integrated enough to do a very good job of matching.
Well-
I'm not trying to force a solution. I'm just asking the question.
Well, on our Facebook page, every problem that has come up, we have actually found a solution for. And for the bigger asks, we also have Medfield Helping Hands, which
Mhm.
you're familiar with. It used to be called Lots of Helping Hands or Neighborhood Brigade. So we have a lot of depth on our Facebook page. Very good relationships. As you said, we've been around for 20 years. So I've created 20 years worth of relationships with the different departments in town. And so I feel pretty comfortable. We have not come across a problem yet that we have not been able to, as a community, address and help. We welcome and we do post regularly that we'd like people to let us know if they need help with either private messages or whatever. I understand the effects of splintering, but this woman did come to Evan and I and ask if we wanted to use her Google Docs form. And I thought, Evan and I had a very brief conversation about it. And we thought that, we were able to handle everything as it comes in now. We've got the financial request form. We've got an avenue for people to come for help. And we thought that would just kind of muddy the waters a bit. But we didn't want to discourage her from her feel good project. We both said that, we wouldn't necessarily promote it, but we told her how she could go about publicizing it, because if everybody's trying to do something good, that's not a bad thing.
Unless they're doing it in an incoherent way where we don't do as good a job of doing good. That's where I'm
possible.
coming from.
It's possible, Gus. I mean, I think if you splinter, you run the risk of things falling through the cracks. I think the good side of it is that we've got multiple people looking in all of these different things. So
Right.
I think, this woman will probably be monitoring the Google Doc, and if somebody submits something, she'll work to do that. And if she's not sure how to fulfill that need,
Maybe
she
she'll-
has our contact information, and I'm sure could post it in our group. One of the things that we've also been doing is, because not everybody's on Facebook, we've made a concerted effort to reach out to, for example, people with the Council on Aging and other individual groups, for them to do outreach to their constituents to make sure they're aware of this. And that
this
even if
started as a
somebody's
team.
correct.
I'm
And so
sorry.
even if they're not on Facebook, that request might be able to funnel through somebody else and get to this overall audience. So I hear you in terms of, there may be lots of disparate efforts going around there. I think we stepped up in the beginning because we didn't see anything and we thought that there was a need and that we were in a good position to be able to help. We weren't trying to take monopoly or ownership of anything. We were just trying to do what we normally do, which is to support the community and support Medfield. We're happy to take on a more substantial role if that's something that the Board of Selectmen wants us to do, or we're happy to scale back a little bit if you think this is something that should run through the town. There wasn't any sort of directive. So, in the absence of one, we created something. So, but we're very happy to work with anybody to make sure that we're, supporting the town.
Right.
Well,
Mike and Pete, I've been doing all the talking here. I should let you guys weigh in. My point, Evan, just to be clear, there's no need to defend anything you're doing. I've just found myself asking, do we have coherence, and is there, and I'm not even advocating that you have to do what the Board of Selectmen wants done. It's just, I'm asking a question on behalf of the community. What's the most coherent way for us to organize all these resources?
Totally
would like to-
appreciate that. And I don't feel, attacked or threatened at all. In fact, I feel honored that we have the opportunity to tell you all the great things that we're doing, because, we've been doing great things for the town for a long time. And, this is the opportunity for us to utilize what we've already built in an effective manner.
So Gus, I would weigh in by, I guess, disclosing the fact that I've basically been involved with the Medfield Foundation for 20 years, and it started with a very simple premise, which was that there was probably a willingness in the town of Medfield for private philanthropy for public purposes. And so that, and over the 20 years, the Medfield Foundation has now raised over 2.3 million, Abby, I think it is,
Over 3.
Over 3 million.
3
Over
million.
3 million, Pete.
Oh my goodness, I'm so far behind. Thank you. So that it's raised a lot of money.
But all that money goes right back into the community.
Mhm.
For example, the money that we're raising for the COVID relief, 100% of that $10,000 is going to go back to the Medfield residents. MFI is not even taking an administrative fee. It's going straight back in.
And
So
you-
you can, that's something you could feel pretty good about.
And the usual administrative fee that the Medfield Foundation charges is just 1%.
Yeah, it's
doesn't
to
really-
cover our stamps and,
So it's in many ways, it's the best bargain for anybody in town that wants to raise money for good purposes in town. You get a very good structure that you can use that does all the reporting and the back office sorts of things. So I just,
I guess my question, and again, I'm just asking the question, is there anything that anyone in town, whether it's government, town government, or whether it's volunteers, is there anything we should collectively be doing differently now for the next, couple of months while the emergency is here? Is there anything we could or should be doing differently now that would improve either the ability of people who want to help to be able to kind of make their willingness, whether it's financial willingness or willingness to devote time, would make it easier for people who would like to do that to do it in a meaningful way, or anything we should be doing that would make sure that people who do need help know how to go and get there? And the answer may be no, we're just doing this kind of decentralized grassroots thing and everybody's doing their own thing, but because we're all in similar orbits, it all just kind of works out. I'm just asking the question whether not that we're not doing enough, whether there's something we could be doing differently that would make this whole process, particularly around this emergency. I'm not trying to restructure long-term stuff.
I think that somehow communicating to our residents, whether it's, and the question is with, this defragmentized media, it's very hard to figure out how people are getting their information. But knowing that there is a financial assistance form that MFI has created, knowing that MFI is collecting funds from people who feel that they're in a nice, secure financial position, they can help that way. The food cupboard, we've completely changed our operations, and I'd be happy to talk with you about that a little bit. But the food cupboard could use some. I've been posting on the Facebook pages in Medfield that I'm aware of, that we are open for business. Call if you need emergency food. So I think it's just a matter of hitting people where they're going to get the information. I've been working with Lisa Donovan over at the Council on Aging, and she's been doing a lot of wellness calls. And she is, when she's making her wellness calls, one of the things now this is an interesting, do you mind if I talk with you a little bit about the food cupboard a little bit?
Well, actually, to be honest with you, Abby, that was one of the thoughts that caused me to ask the question a week ago. And again, not a criticism of the COVID fund through Medfield Foundation, but as I was thinking about that, my head went in the direction of saying, I wonder if there's people that would normally donate to the food cupboard that would be drawn off into donating to the COVID fund, and what impact would that have on the food cupboard? That's actually a big part of what prompted me to ask the question a week ago.
I could honestly say that the food cupboard right now, we're not taking any food donations. So, we normally take, day-old bread from Blue Moon and, Donut Express and things like that, and we give it out. But now we are strictly, everything that the food cupboard is doing now is purchased, because to eliminate, too many hands.
Mhm.
And we have, we served 70 households last week. We gave away 588 bags of food. We had 2 emergency food requests. We are working very hard to get it out there that the food cupboard is available. And even if it's not a distribution, the food's available. We are no longer we used to have a shopping type of format system, and now we're no longer doing that. We are doing a delivery about 50% of our food is delivered. Anybody that's a senior citizen is automatically getting it delivered now. And then for some of the more younger or able-bodied people, they're coming to the parking lot. We determine we have somebody in the parking lot being the monitor. They text inside what bags they want, and we bring the bags out to them. So there's very, very little personal contact anymore. But we feel that that's safest for both of our volunteers and for our clients.
But here's my real question, Abby. Recognizing you're not taking food donations, so that probably has gone down. Have you seen the level of financial donations to the food cupboard go up, stay the same since the beginning of this emergency?
Our town is a very generous town. I cannot speak for what we've received in this past week, but we are financially in good shape. I don't think that we'll be able to sustain buying food for the next 2 years, but we're hoping that the dynamics of our situation will change enough. We are working more with the Greater Boston Food Bank, who is also experiencing some shortages. We do get some free food from them, so that's always a plus. But right now, our food cupboard and MFI, neither are in dire straits, but I don't think that the depth of need is where it's going to end up being, put it that way. I think a month and a half from now, it's going to be, anybody that's kind of like springing a leak is going to be, it could possibly potentially be a disaster. One of the things I talked with Sean Dooley about is some of our residents are very concerned about, especially folks that live in Park and live in Wilkins Glen are concerned that if their rent is late, they'll be evicted. I've been talking with Sean about, them putting together some type of bill or something in the works to kind of give the renters a little bit of a relief. And he actually said that it could also be done possibly somewhere along the line. It was mentioned that maybe the town, it could be done on a local level as well. Maybe that's something you want to look into, Gus. And I'm just telling you what I've heard and what's out there. So that's.
I believe that the courts have actually put off any evictions. I mean, the courts basically aren't open at the moment. I think that the governor specifically put a stay on evictions.
Did they?
At least a month.
And there's additional information coming from DHCD about organizations and rental facilities that get money from them where they would, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact details of it, but DHCD has some resources for their clients, so to say. So I can.
That would be, that could be communicated to some of these rental properties. That would be really.
I actually touched base with the manager of the park last week. So, yeah.
Does anybody know the details of the lunches that are being given away at the high school?
Yeah. What do you want to know?
What's that all about? How many are going out? Are people getting?
Oh, very little. Between 12 and 1, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Last week it was Monday through Friday. This week it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're giving away lunches to anybody that's in the reduced lunch program. They've started, they are not getting a lot of people coming. So one of the things that, this is combining a lot of different things, but Blue Moon used to give all their day-old bread to the food cupboard. Now the food cupboard is no longer taking that bread. So we tried to find a way to help Blue Moon and help the hungry. So now that bread is being brought to the high school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays to be distributed to our reduced lunch recipients and any of our seniors that come or want to come. They don't, the senior citizens are not getting the free lunch, but they can come and get the bread and the pastries and the bagels.
Oh, good.
And every single day so far, all all of the free bread and stuff has been taken. Now that they no longer do it on Tuesday and Thursday, I just did this today. I picked up at Blue Moon, and any bread that's wrapped, I put on the table in Tilden Village in their community room. So they get the benefit of having all the wrapped breads, and then all the loose breads I bring over to the high school, and and I put it in their bread box in the back, their loading dock. And there's a gal who works in the lunch program at the high school who says that she has a way to give those to, I guess there are people in need in her community. I'm not sure she's from Medfield or not, but at least that food is going to good. Somebody's getting it. So, just that's one of the benefits of being in town for a long time and being in a bunch of different organizations is, we're through that Facebook page, we're able to pull in all these resources and make things work a little bit smoother for the folks in town who are vulnerable.
Are the schools the ones that are running the lunch program?
They are.
There, and it's not just free and reduced lunch. Anybody who has need can come and get a free.
Oh, Mike, when I spoke with Mike, he said only that they had to record they were only getting reimbursed
reimbursed. That's correct. But Dr. Marston had said anybody in need could come.
Oh, that's interesting. That's new.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Gus, to go back to your original question, if the food cupboard found itself short of funds and we were raising money in the COVID relief fund, that money could be used towards the food cupboard. It's one of the benefits of pooling all of our resources and being able to direct them where they're going to have the greatest impact on the town. So, that's again how we're trying to raise the funds. So we would never want to take money away from other donations, but if if people donate directly to the food cupboard, great. If they donate directly to us, eventually they will all be used to support the town the way it's needed.
And in terms of things that the town could be doing, Gus, I think that the human or the human services element of the town is really run by the youth outreach and the outreach worker at the Council on Aging. And the youth outreach workers are the ones that basically get the money that the Medfield Foundation raises. So they're the ones that seem to know the people that really have the need. And they're certainly consulting with the Council on Aging outreach worker.
They are.
The other thing that happened, Gus, you're on mute. Christine actually was able to put together some information on the Medfield town website that lists things there. I guess you guys have a COVID-19 page. And so there's some resources listed there. That to me is one of the ways that the town can actually get the word out is, if you're directing people for more information to the town website, these resources are listed there. So if somebody wants to learn more about donating or getting funds, I believe the links are listed on the website, and that's a great way that the town is able to help spread the word. So thank you, Christine, for doing that.
That was a piece behind the question as well. Christine, maybe I'll direct it to you. What I'm getting at is if people let's say that they're listening in on this meeting, the other three people besides the ones you can see on your screen right now. If somebody wanted to know where they could go to do something good to help people in the town, it may be that from the town standpoint, all we're saying is, if you go to the town website and you go to the special COVID page, you will be able to see all of the, I don't want to call them endorsed organizations, but you will be able to see the links to the organization that the town has been able to verify, to confirm are good links to go to. We're not necessarily saying these are the only places you could go, but basically if people wanted to figure out what a smart thing to do would be, maybe their first step is to go to the town website, the COVID page, with the links to the different organizations that they could consider, and that would at least point people in the right direction.
So that's what my approach has been. When anybody has a specific concern, there was a resident who had a very specific concern. I was able to put her in touch with Evan. She had an idea, and so Evan was able to take care of it. And that's kind of how Evan and I had a conversation, and we're able to get all of those links on the website. So generally, I send people there, but if they have a specific issue or they want to help with something, then I send it directly to Evan.
Yeah, and then we're making sure, through our connections, and really it's mostly through Abby's connections, that, we pull in the resources and connect people to get an answer, get the help that they need. And if we can't figure it out, we then put out the word and we try to find people. And, that's really how we got the idea behind Blue Moon and donating at the high school was, we posted an issue on the site that said, hey, Blue Moon has got some day old stuff. They used to give it to the food cupboard. What should we do with it? And we got a number of suggestions. And then this one ultimately is how we decided to distribute. And so it's sort of the power of the network, in effect. You're on mute again, Gus.
It sounds like, if nothing else, if people take the time to watch this Board of Selectmen meeting and this particular conversation, they will come up with enough information to be able to make intelligent decisions about where to go to either get help or to help out. So my question's answered, unless Peter, Mike, you have anything else.
So I would just say, Evan and Abby, if there are additional links or information that you want us to post on the website, just shoot me an email and we can get that up there right away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for coming and talking. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I think our next item was Jay Duncan.
Yes, so just give me 1 minute to quickly change attendees.
Oh.
All right, and we'll promote Jay. Hold on 1 sec.
Goodness, you can just swap people out, huh?
I'm swapping people out. It's a lot of control to be the host.
Yeah.
All right.
Where do I go when you delete me, Christine?
You don't want to know.
I guess.
Okay.
All right, I'm there, but I have no, oh, there we go. Start
Yep.
my video. There we go. Hello.
Hey, Jay.
Right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh,
We're ready for an update. So the floor is yours.
All right, so we have been working diligently. We have had our first public meeting, as I think a lot of you were aware, most of you, or all of you are aware of, and some were there. We have been working along very diligently, but we've come to a point where in our last meeting where we had a discussion about the next meeting and the rest of the process. Now, the next meeting was supposed to be last week. We held off because of the situation, obviously. Then we thought we'd do something like this, a Zoom meeting. We were practicing it, trying to organize it, and really do a dry run. But in the process of having that meeting, we kind of came to a conclusion that maybe we should consider kind of slowing down and backing off, which we really don't want to do. But some of the reasons that came up amongst the committee were first concerned about participation, being able to get the right mix of people, or enough people, or even any people, depending on how their access to the medium. I mean, we talked about a lot of ways to address that, that we could have follow-up discussions and follow-up meetings to try to address the potential lack of participation given what's going on and the access to this type of forum. Folks are also concerned about the inventory that we just completed, and we have actually inventory volume 2, an assessment of the existing conditions, was just pulled together. But who knows whether that changes much, depending on how long this goes and how folks are affected. For example, could the businesses, hate to say it, but could the number of businesses, the types of businesses not be will be different soon, and would our information be out of date? And then another thing was also, would people even be concerned about this whole process, given economic issues, employment issues, health issues? So we're kind of we decided to take a month, just continue to meet, have our next meeting, but think about it, and then have a discussion about kind of where we go from here. Now, there were all kinds of things already thrown out. Should we make it more of a strategic plan, make it more of a shorter term vision because we don't know what's going to happen in the long term. There were a bunch of ideas thrown out. Now we decided we're not going to change course. We're not going to do anything yet. We're not going to do anything drastic, but we should kind of think about what's going on in the world and in Medfield and how that might affect this process. So, you know, why will people even want to create a vision for the future when we don't know what the future is, for example? Now, again, that's short term. This is longer term. Again, nothing was decided, but that's kind of the update. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, get some feedback. We're fully prepared to move forward and get it done. There were some concerns that maybe, you know, this changes things a little bit, and how would it change it and how we should react to that.
Any comments, Pete or Mike?
I was there for the meeting, and I guess I hadn't gone into the meeting thinking that we would be pausing, but as the meeting progressed and the issues were discussed, it did make sense to me that we actually put a pause on things. One of the surprising things that I heard was the consultant basically starting to talk about their involvement and their timing issues. And I guess that may become an issue for the town with respect to all sorts of contracts. And those force majeure clauses in all these contracts about whether people are excused from performance because of an act of God. But
So is the consultant looking for more time, Pete or Jay?
I don't think the consultants were.
No, I don't think they actually, I got the sense they didn't want to pause. They just wanted to kind of get it done. And they were like, well, you know, if we
It's scheduled.
Yeah, scheduling.
Of course they do.
Yeah, right. They want them.
Jay and Pete are being very nice. I joined the meeting about halfway through and
Yep.
started to raise some of the questions that I was concerned that our residents are going through something which can be very emotional. We just heard, you know, we have people who are taking advantage of the COVID relief fund. I didn't think it was appropriate right now to be asking them to participate in this when they have some bigger life issues going on. And I was just worried about overall presentation. I know we all love Zoom. We're all getting very used to Zoom. I know not all of our seniors are on Zoom. So I was worried about losing their participation in this process as well. So I had just asked everybody on the committee to think about, you know, even just a 30-day, kind of like a regrouping, a pause, just to figure out exactly where we were headed. And I think there's some questions that are going to be raised out of this, and how we're funding certain things that are going to play into the plan. I probably won't be invited back to their next meeting.
Oh, absolutely. You're always welcome.
I mean, my quick reaction, Jay, to your point is that I understand the argument yet, and you know, I've probably been pushing you to deliver on time at least more vocally than anyone. But I think I'm sympathetic to the argument that this is not the time to be trying to force long-term decisions in the face of short-term uncertainty and distraction. I would, from a contract standpoint, I would expect the committee to talk to the consultants about stretching the period of performance. I'm a consultant. I understand why they don't want that to happen, because like everybody else who's a consultant, they're looking and watching their contracts either get canceled or delayed. And if you're lucky enough to have some clients that don't do that, then you're a happy camper. But in this case, it seems to me that what you're saying is reasonable. It's not the best time to go try to finalize a master plan.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I agree with Gus and Pete and you on that. I think there's nothing magical about finishing this on the schedule that we set out. We're going to know a lot more about what the next year will look like in 30 days. And I think it doesn't make a lot of sense I think you've gotten this as far as you can get it. And at this point, we need to have things return a little bit to normal to be able to press it forward anymore. So I don't see any harm in it. And if we come to 30 days and there's a degree of uncertainty, we can pause for another 30 days. I think a lot of stuff this spring is going to be provisional and pushed back and adjusted, and we'll just kind of have to go as circumstances change and as the facts change and adjust. So I don't, unless there's some work you think your committee can accomplish with all of the questions that are presently out there, I think it's better just to take a break.
Okay.
There's a number of documents that have recently been posted to the town's website that the committee has been working on over the past couple of months that were being prepared in advance of the second forum, that folks in the community, if they perhaps need some reading material or a little distraction over the next coming weeks, there's summary sheets. It's basically a 2-page document for each chapter. And then there's the inventory and assessment of existing conditions, which is a broader spectrum of those chapters. The list of preliminary goals and objectives. The list of goals and objectives and the preliminary vision and goals have all been posted to the town's website. So it's maybe not the worst time to have a little bit of time for people to be able to digest those documents if they're interested. And I just had a conversation with Pam Gardner from the library yesterday. One of the committee members, Cynthia Green, she had prepared a crossword puzzle, Medfield Fun Facts, for the first forum. And for the second forum, she prepared a word match based on the summary sheets. So Pam, in one of her upcoming newsletters, is going to send out the word match game and with links to the master planning documents.
And the other thing that we're considering too, to try to help preserve budget and also gives ourselves kind of some alone time, so to speak, is not to invite the consultant to at least the next meeting, so that we can have kind of an unbiased, not that they're biased, but well, they are a little, but some just kind of a really good, thoughtful conversation amongst the committee members without the consultants present, and we save them showing up at another meeting. And preserve the budget a little. So that was our thought.
Speaking as a consultant, I think you need to do what's best for the town, which you're probably right not to look for the consultant to give you advice on timing on that. But if I would expect that we would be professional and as forthcoming with the consultant about what we're looking at, so they at least know what to expect. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to say, listen, we need to push this out. Here's what we're thinking. Here's what we're doing. You don't have to commit to things because we can't commit to things. But in the absence of being able to just move things the way it's been proposed, I think keeping a professional relationship and being as open about the information that's appropriate to share with the consultant can go a long way to maintaining the relationship that you're going to want to be able to lean on. Whenever we come out of this tunnel, we'll still be looking for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a consultant, I'm thinking about that as well. And we'll also look for other things that maybe we can continue to do to keep the momentum going, but really not set the whole course of the process right now until we can better reevaluate. So I mean, we really don't want to, but I think everybody agrees that's the best course of action right now.
I think we do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you to the committee as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Right, take care. Bye.
All right. Take care. Let's see. Next item I had was Board of Selectmen to discuss small business resources and the use of the Economic Vitality Fund. And Mike, I think you're the one that prompted that one, right?
Yes, I definitely put that on there. Obviously, this crisis is having a significant impact on a lot of our downtown businesses, restaurants and otherwise. And we do have this relatively modest remaining Economic Vitality Fund, but there are other municipalities that are doing things to support their small businesses. Cambridge has a lot more money than we do, but they have been using it essentially to pay restaurants in Cambridge to make food for people who need it and need to kind of match the people in need with the need of the restaurants to be busy and working and to keep their people employed. And so, this struck me as a circumstance where we ought to use what tools we have at our disposal to give whatever modest assistance we can to helping those businesses in the downtown stay alive during this period of time. And so I'm in favor of using that money and whatever other monies we can use that are within our disposal and discretion to do that in a responsible way. And I wanted to start the conversation about how best to do that.
I guess my concern with that, Mike, is that I was hoping personally that that money could get used for the sustainability consultants, because there's a multiplier effect of hiring that particular consultant for, we were talking about $25,000-$30,000 for that consultant to bring back in maybe a couple $100,000 in grants to the town. I think
Well, I don't think that would be within the town meeting authorization for that fund.
that the town meeting wouldn't have.
Hiring a consultant to go to energy committee meetings and apply for grants, I don't think that that would be within the scope of that fund.
Well, I don't know. It strikes me that it makes a lot of sense to use the money that way. I've never seen the write-up of the way that that money is supposed to be spent. I mean, originally it was downtown beautification or something. But given the fact that there's such a multiplier from using it for a sustainability consultant, I was hoping that we would use it that way. And I don't think that we need all the money if it,
Well, there's $9,000 in the account right now, Pete.
yeah, and if we get 15 this coming year, we'd have 24. I think that the consultant needs maybe 15 or 20 of that, because I think the grant can provide 10 is my recollection.
But I had thought with the conclusion from our last meeting was that we were going to fit that consultant into the regular budget for next year, if at all. That if it was going to be an employed position, it was going to go through the personnel board or
Yeah,
otherwise.
if we can do that, that's great.
Regular budget process. I don't think we should use money that is set aside really to promote private business to a certain extent for a town municipal consultant or employee.
Sarah, when we met with the Energy Committee, I'm not sure that you have the answer to this question, but I'm guessing either you or Christine do. When we met with the Energy Committee, one of the points that we covered around this discussion was the grant request for this coming fiscal year was due by the 27th of March. And we clearly weren't going to have anybody in to write that grant. Do we know, did a grant go in, or was the deadline for the grant
They've extended the deadline. They did
They
extend
extended the deadline because okay.
Yeah, Amy's
'cause
working on it.
So what I'm getting at is, I think another point that we made in that discussion was we weren't going to be able to have, if the deadline had not been extended, the grant for the coming fiscal year would have had to have been done coming out of the town with existing resources. If that grant goes in, then the funding for a sustainability coordinator, I would think either would come from that grant or would come from the demonstrated savings that any grant we got next year would generate for the town. So back to your point, Mike, about the operating budget, if we have money we've budgeted, say, for electricity, and through a grant we wind up saving money on electricity, I think it would be easier to have the discussion there around using some of those savings to pay for a coordinator. But I think that grant goes in before. I guess what I'm really saying is, under the current circumstances, I don't know that a decision about whether or not to hire a coordinator, whether this is even the right time to do it, much less how to pay for it.
And I would also think, and this is a question for Christine, for you to think about at your department head meetings, but with a number of employees who are working remotely and who might not have their full suite of responsibilities that would ordinarily fill their complete day. There may be employees who would be able to offer assistance both on writing the grant for this year, and in the process, pick up some of the knowledge and skills that would enable them to offer that assistance in the future. And so I leave it to you to figure out who's working a full 8-hour day remotely and just as busy as they were before, and how best to reallocate that. But I would think that there may be some people who are underutilized at the moment. I know it's certainly true in a lot of our private businesses. There are some people who are just as busy in these circumstances as some who aren't. And maybe you could match up some of that available time, because certainly that's something that can be done remotely and something that can be done without having to come into the office, to keep moving that process along, and then relieving some of the burden on you and Nick and others who are busier as a result of these circumstances than you would be otherwise.
We actually have a department head meeting at 10:30. We'll add that to the agenda to talk about tomorrow morning.
I think it's generally a good question, and just to try to make sure that, because one of the concerns that I have, not just with our town employees, but with people generally, is making sure that capable employees remain engaged and have stuff to do, because it's both harmful to the employer, but also harmful to the employee when you're sort of underutilized and you feel like you're not getting that much done. And this grant and other things might be a good project for someone who might have a little bit of time on their hands.
Christine, how long was, you said the deadline got extended. Do you know how far out?
I don't remember. Nick, do you remember what it is?
I'd have to look again. I thought it was pushed
I
at least till the end of April, but I'd have to look.
Yeah, I think it was about a month.
About a month. Okay. Well, that might work. Hey, so leaving that aside, Mike, if we have first off, Pete, I'll be really surprised if we get more money in this account from the Warrant Committee. I'd be stunned if they give us 15,000. They might refill the bucket to 15,000 as a practical matter, just rightly or wrongly. I don't think we'd see 15,000 in new funds unless we discover oil up at the state hospital or something like that. But Mike, just taking your idea on its merits around finding some ways to help the local businesses in the town, and thinking about that idea that some places they're actually paying the businesses to provide meals to to people that might need them. It's almost too bad we didn't have this discussion before Abby left, I guess. But I'm just thinking of a couple things. So let's say in that fund we have 9,000 without knowing whether there's any more funding to come in. So let's just, for argument's sake, say that's the money. How would we go about figuring out which restaurants to give how much money to for what food?
So I had a little bit of a back and forth with Sorrel about this, about how best to structure it. And
Mark is actually at the meeting now. I didn't,
I'm here.
sorry, I had muted him this entire meeting and I apologize.
Well, please keep him muted still.
I can go home, actually.
And I can characterize our conversation however I'd like. And because my original thought was because one of the great problems with any of these stimulus efforts or any of these government spending programs is that we are just so in love with kind of the bureaucracy of it, the means testing of it, and the debating this, that, and the other thing, and who gets what and who deserves it and who doesn't do it. And the last stimulus that we had for the last recession kind of got bogged down into that, and they're trying to get by that a little bit this time, but it just ends up, a lot of times creating a lot of work for people in the government, oddly enough. And so my original thought was, well, what if we just bought gift cards? We just decided we're going to buy gift cards for whichever restaurants made the list, and you ask a good question, and then we'll give that to the food cupboard, or we'll give it to the Medfield Foundation, or we'll give it to, and they can distribute those as part of their kind of distribution of food. Mark raised some good points and concerns that he had about that structure, because, and he can describe it in more detail. I think there's a limit on the ability of municipalities to buy stuff in advance, and again, some of the restrictions around that. So he had some thoughts on how that might work. Again, this might be, again, a job for an underutilized municipal employee who might be able to call around and try to figure this out, who would be best positioned to do it and the best way to distribute that. Because the idea is you're trying to get a little bit of money to the businesses up front, and then to do what they do, and provide, help satisfy needs that people have. And Mark, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about some of your structural thoughts. I think there was a little bit of bureaucracy around what you suggested, but not too much.
Yeah, I tried to keep it simple, and I understand that it was a modest amount of money. So, and also that you want to get the money to the businesses. So my thought was, and I don't know that I directly indicated this to you, Mike, but would be to partner with either the food cupboard or one of those various groups that was in earlier. And there's two ways that I saw it, and there's nothing there may be others, but on my thinking, one would be that they would arrange with a restaurant or restaurants to cook X number of meals at X number per meal. The restaurant would prepare the meals, and the private group would pick them up and distribute them to whoever was determined to be eligible, and then the restaurant would submit a voucher to the town for payment. The other way to do it would be to identify the eligible individuals and having made an agreement with the restaurants as to how much per meal and what the meal would be, et cetera. And those people would go to the restaurant, make contact, and then upon filling that meal request, the restaurant would submit an individual voucher. So the simplest way would be the bulk thing, the more individualized way, but it probably produces more paperwork is when you're trying to do it on an individual basis. But there's obviously enough need out there just from what I anecdotally heard from the earlier speakers. As apparently,
I think that
there.
whichever way is going to be the most efficient and also kind of put the people who are the beneficiaries of this in the least awkward position, right? Where you don't have to kind of go
Right.
separate door or progress. That's why the gift cards would be the best way to do it, because you wouldn't be distinguishing between anybody else who had a gift card and coming if you'd gotten it this way. But I think if you could do it in the way that's simplest and most confidential, is not filling out, filling out the minimal amount of paperwork and preserving the dignity of the people who are receiving it as much as the restaurants, I think that's what I would be in favor of doing, and something that would actually could be done before this whole situation abates.
I just happened to see something. HESCO apparently already has an established program where they deliver meals, I don't know where they get them, to eligible seniors as part of the services they provide. So there are some models out there.
HESCO is doing Meals on Wheels.
Okay, where are they do you know where they get the meals from and what that arrangement is?
It's my understanding that HESCO makes them at their main kitchen and then delivers them.
Oh, okay.
They deliver them every day to the Council on Aging when it's open.
They did. Now they're delivering them actually to the residents directly. Just to let you know, we do have a question from an attendee who would like to know if residents can donate to the Economic Vitality Fund to help local businesses. It's not set up that way. Currently, this is just an appropriation given by town meeting. I would recommend that if residents want to contribute to the Economic Vitality, they should be buying gift cards and going to the restaurants. And they can probably do that a lot quicker than we can do it, unfortunately. So that would be my recommendation.
Or to one of the private groups who was here earlier. The worst thing to do would be to put money into public fund. You lose all kinds of flexibility.
I don't know if that answers, Chris, I don't know if that answers your question, but if not, let me know. We can talk further about that.
Yeah, I'm going to make an editorial comment here. Just listening to this conversation. First, Mike, I think you're raising a good idea. I think it's worth serious consideration on what we can do to help. But as I listen to the conversation, there are two pieces to it. One piece is there something we can do in terms of using funds out of the Economic Vitality Fund to help businesses? And then as we talked about how to do it, we were talking about how to get food to people who need food. And at the risk of sounding, I'm not really trying to sound hard-nosed, but I'm basically saying those are two different purposes. If we were really just trying to get food to people who need food, I would say, let's take the Economic Vitality Fund and give it to the food cupboard, because we will get more food out to more people by doing that. On the other hand, if we're trying to help, the businesses stay afloat, it seems like we should be doing something which might get people who are likely to use restaurants under normal circumstances to learn more about some of the businesses or some of the restaurants that we have in town that maybe they haven't tried yet. So which would also possibly give you more leverage out of whatever economic vitality funds we use, because you wouldn't have to give those people free meals. You might only have to give those people, not that many of them even need discount meals, but you might want to pay for something that would make the meals make people more inclined to try those restaurants out at a time when you have to go and take takeout or something like that.
So that you miss, I kind of short-circuited my presentation from what I had gone back and forth with Mike about, because it didn't seem necessary, but the starting point needs to be taxpayer funds can only be expended for a recognized public purpose. It so happens that needy seniors and needy school children both have been recognized as satisfying that public purpose. Giving money to individual businesses or groups of businesses, at least up until now, has not. So that's why setting up a mechanism to run it, to be able to provide the restaurant with funds, but in turn have it expended for a public purpose. That's what the critical element is.
Thanks, Mark. Okay. You're on mute, Mike.
Looked the wrong way, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Some municipalities, not ours, have kind of community development corporations that are designed to provide grants and seed money for businesses that are specifically set up for that purpose, and we don't have one. So the city of Boston has one. The city of Boston is exploring a grant program, but they probably had to get special legislation for it under some community development mechanism that we don't have.
So I think it's a great idea. And I guess what I'm wondering about is if we're talking about spending $9,000, I'm just not sure that that's going to be enough to keep businesses afloat. It may be too small.
That's likely true.
But it also makes a difference. Yeah, I think you're right, Pete. And I'm actually having a hard time visualizing the exact concept that'll meet all the wickets and that would be workable and fast. This is just me, but in my head, the way I look at this situation is we are in a phase, and I'm not qualified to say this, but in my head, I'm saying there's something that's going to kind of be like this out through Memorial Day weekend. And then at the end of that Memorial Day weekend, or whenever, 4th of July maybe, but there will be a different phase of this thing. I guess maybe the way to look at it is it'll be the phase whenever this thing peaks at whatever it's going to peak at. And then there's going to be a downslope after that peak, which is still not going to be back to normal. Right now, the uphill side of that peak, I'm arbitrarily picking as Memorial Day weekend is the turning point when we're not going uphill anymore. The kinds of problems for helping businesses in that 2-month window, perhaps that money would make a difference. For helping businesses on a sustained basis out into the fall or something like that, definitely wouldn't. And I don't know that this is helpful to anybody else, but the way I think about the problem is there's the problem of the next 2 months, and then there's the problem after that. So for instance, Sarah, you were talking about the moves to basically by the state to prevent people from being evicted. Well, that's all well and good. They can't be evicted, but when this is all past the peak, they'll still owe a couple of months rent or a couple months mortgage or whatever they have. So they still have a problem. It's just not the problem of being thrown out on the street in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, there's other programs that we did post to our website. They may be what Mike was referring to as the red tape and bureaucratic programs, but the new paycheck protection program, and there's I just posted it to the town's website this afternoon. Economic injury, basically small business loans, where the purpose of the at least the paycheck protection program would be a loan that is forgiven if they can start getting people back to work and getting people paid so that they can meet their obligations.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, my only point was perhaps in the near term, that Economic Vitality Fund can make a difference to people. It's not a long-term fix, but in the intensity of what they're dealing with now, it might be something that could make the difference. Just that I'm not yet at a point where I can visualize the specific program we would do, but that would meet all the legal wickets.
So when the warrant committee, who actually did vote 2 meetings ago to give the fund 15,000 and make a recommendation for 15,000 at town meeting, one of their discussion points, and I believe what turned the vote on this, because as you know, there's several people who don't support the fund at all. I think what turned them is that come this fall, and especially for December, the businesses that currently donate to make the holiday stroll a success may not be able to do that. And one of the concerns that Amanda Hall had, who's handling the warrant article, was we should try and have that fund available to step in to make sure we don't lose a significant community event like that that's normally sponsored by the businesses, that we kind of give them a pass this year that will take on more of the cost. Because I think by then we're going to need some of our regular community events and sense of community back for us.
What sort of a number is that, Chris? Do you know?
That's the 15,000. They voted to put.
No, I know, but to run the
Oh,
holidays.
do the whole thing? I don't know. I can allow Jean to talk. Jean is actually watching the meeting. Hold on one second. Hi, Jean.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Pete, the answer is the businesses last year sponsored the stroll was about $7,500.
Okay.
That was in addition to the more than 5,000 that the Board of Selectmen generously allocated from that same fund for the public safety measures.
So I think the warrant committee's thinking about this was that, even if we can't use this for the businesses right now and it's not enough, it's going to be beneficial for us to support some of these events more than we have in the past.
I do think, Christina, it would be worth trying to sort out the details on how we might do this so we can consider it at a future meeting. Because in addition to the actual dollars, I do think there is a symbolic value to having the town doing what it can, even if it's modest, to support those businesses that we have. And maybe there would be some sort of a multiplier effect to that. To Chris's question, maybe not by contributing to that fund, but by people stepping up and saying they're going to do a little bit extra for those businesses to help them get through this phase. Because I suspect, I agree with Gus. I mean, a lot, and you hear this from a lot of the economic analysis too, is the businesses want to be able to still be around when things snap back, when things come back. And they're trying to figure out how to get through this period of time. So there's still something there. The infrastructure is there when whatever normal looks like in 2 months or 6 months, that they haven't lost all of the goodwill and all of the employees and everything that goes into operating a successful business. So maybe, Christine, you can add that to your agenda for your department head meeting. If there's somebody who could put a little time into that, and we could reconvene in a week. And maybe even touch base, whether it's Sarah or somebody else, and touch base with some of the businesses downtown to see which are the ones that are having the hardest time, because some of them probably are affected more than others, given the nature of their business. And then what they think, to Gus's point, if there's some way to structure this in a way that does have a multiplier effect in a different fashion than we're thinking about it right now, we should obviously be open to those suggestions, what would be helpful to them and how we can be supportive of that.
Agreed.
And can I, just to build on Mike's point there, we're talking about all the businesses in downtown. So if I think a lot of our discussions around restaurants, which is one of the few restaurants that still still open and operating in a degraded mode. But I think that request of businesses, if businesses have ideas about appropriate ways that the town can help them, I would extend that to all the businesses in town, not just the ones that are food serving businesses.
I agree. One of the things, and I believe we touched on this briefly at our last meeting, we have a handful of people at the town hall. I think on average, we're less than 4 people physically in the building, 4 or 5. And what I've been trying to do is every day provide lunch to the essential employees who are here And I've been going out personally to pick it up and talk to the business owners about what we can do to help. My pants aren't going to fit when we all go back to this, but we're all getting a decent lunch and getting a chance to actually talk to everybody downtown. And I highly recommend the Reuben at Blue Moon. We had that today.
Maybe we can sell advertising at Board of Selectmen's meetings to throw that money into the Economic Vitality Fund, and we'd no longer be hostage to the warrant committee's whims.
We might just need to start catering our meetings and invite people in for dinner. That might be a way to do it.
Right. All right, we done with that topic? All right.
Good.
Next item on the agenda is Board of Selectmen to discuss Town of Medfield bill collection with Treasurer Collector Georgia Kalivas. Take it away, Georgia.
Good evening. So the COVID-19 situation is obviously causing a financial strain on everyone. My office has, since we're close to the public, unfortunately, we don't have interaction with our taxpayers. We do have, we are offering our online services. We do have the Dropbox in the back of Town Hall. People can go onto their own online bill pay. But I just want to back up a little. So our office is reasonable, we're fair, we're compassionate, we're understanding. And above all, I want to thank those taxpayers who have met the deadlines. Unfortunately, because of these difficult times, we are seeing a few problems. Our real estate tax bills are due May 1st. The governor has yet to sign the bill that would delay the deadline to June 1st. I was told today that the Senate will take this matter up on Wednesday and then the House will vote on it on Thursday the 2nd. The Board of Selectmen does not need to vote that in. That'll be voted in by Baker. So if that is voted in, the fourth quarter will be due on June 1st and not on May 1st. Obviously, that will cause a cash flow problem. I know we're going to address a lot of this at our department head meeting tomorrow. Keep in mind that 62% of our real estate taxes are paid by banks, by escrow. We collect $12.3 million quarterly. So if you take 63% of that, we won't get it on May 1st, we will get it on June 1st. We are looking at doing biweekly vendor warrants. April is going to be a tough month. We have 3 payrolls in April. Payroll is about $1.5 million each pay period. So we need to keep that in the back of our mind. Unfortunately, because we are Medfield, we have a very high percentage of our real estate taxes that come in from escrow and not directly paid by taxpayers. The second issue that I'm having is motor vehicle excise tax. The first commitment was mailed out at the end of January. Those bills were due on March 9th, the day before the governor declared the state of emergency. As the tax collector, I have the discretion as to when to put any of those unpaid bills on demand. There were approximately, let's say it was $1.8 million. There were 12,500 tax bills that went out in that commitment. I had the discretion of when I can put them on demand. I have not put those on demand. I do not plan on putting those on demand. The governor will be signing an additional legislation, which the Board of Selectmen will need to approve. And that additional legislation is to waive all penalties and interest on any real estate tax and excise tax from the date of the emergency, which was March 10th, through June 30th. So theoretically, no tax bill, real estate, or excise will incur any penalties or any tax from March 10th through June 30th, which would mean that none of these excise tax bills that have been billed since January 1 will incur additional penalties, which are $25, and warrant fees, which are $17, and interest at 14%. Currently, our receivable listing is higher than it normally is. It's usually 10% of the original commitment. Right now, it's about 40% of the original commitment. which translates into about $55,000 in demands. So if those all get paid by June 30th, we will lose $55,000 in demands and in interest. I have an additional commitment that went out last Friday, very small, about 600 bills. Again, those are due the first week in May. Those bills cannot be put on demand either until July 1st. So the governor is trying to assist taxpayers. As a municipality, we're also trying to assist taxpayers, but just keep in mind that our local receipts will suffer, by making these decisions. I do believe, I'm not sure whether or not the selectmen want to vote that local option in, or we can vote it at your next selectmen's meeting. If the governor votes that in on Thursday, meaning the penalties and the interest to waive it through June 30th.
If they haven't actually passed the legislation and it's been signed, and it hasn't been signed into law, it would be premature to take that vote right now.
Okay, all right. So then I will ask for your vote when it is taken then, when the legislature approves it.
Georgia, from as you were describing that, and you were talking about the interest in things that we wouldn't get, and we'd lose the 55,000. That's all in penalties and interest that you're talking about. Under normal circumstances, I'm assuming most of that would come in on time, so we wouldn't collect those kinds of penalties under normal circumstances. Is that fair?
Usually by now, those bills would have been, after about 30 days, I usually wait another 2 additional weeks. Those would have been on demand by now. So those bills were due March 10th. By now, they would have been with a $25 demand and interest. But now,
okay.
Go ahead.
What I was trying to understand is whether the financial issue here is principally an issue of bill payments that we would have expected to say get in March, that we won't get till June without any added penalties. So it's really the time value of money over that period is what we're losing, or whether under normal circumstances, there's a certain number of people that don't pay bills, and the penalties associated with those bills typically represents a significant added boost to our revenues, even under normal circumstances.
I think it's a combination of both, to be honest with you. Usually this outstanding list is usually 10% of the commitment. Right now, it's more than that. It's triple that. And again, the people are paying online, but a lot of people are suffering. I have many taxpayers who are on a payment plan. I've heard from 3 today that their spouse was laid off, that they cannot abide by that payment plan anymore. So we're going to be seeing a lot of this. I do want to add that, Medfield has a 99.8 collection rate in its taxes. I'm hoping that, we're going to be able to keep that up. It's going to take us a while to get through this. But right now, as the tax collector, my shout out is if you want to pay, you can pay. No penalties, no interest through June 30th, assuming that, the governor will sign that in.
Well, maybe we send another message out to people in town that are not, this is supposed to be a town where a lot of people are financially solid. And maybe the other message is, if you're in good financial shape, the town is going to do its best to not add to the burden of people who are not in good financial shape. So if you're in a position that you can pay your taxes on time, or even pay them early, you can really help Medfield from a cash flow standpoint by getting your taxes in early. If you're one of the people that's not suffering from this and can handle it, please, at least this time around, pay your taxes. If anything, try to pay them early.
I do sit on the state board for Mass Treasurer Collectors, and we are hearing that our monthly state aid for April is going to be delayed, and for May, and possibly for June, because they did change they changed the filing date to July 15th. So the state is going to be strapped for cash. So we may not be receiving our monthly state aid, which is, for us, it's not a lot. It's about $560,000 a month, but still, it's something. And additionally, I did hear, and Christine also mentioned it to me, our school reimbursement may be delayed by this month too.
I suppose we don't get to charge them 14% for late.
Georgia, what's the outlook, just looking ahead to the next 3 months? I mean, obviously, just through June 30th. What is there any risk that we're going to have a shortfall and not be able to pay our bills between now and June 30th?
I don't think we're going to, because I do believe that we're going to be proposing some type of a spending freeze. I'm gonna let Christine speak on that. I know we're going to be doing our vendor warrants every other week, and hopefully we can push a little bit into May, or at the end of May when we do get our funding in June, in June for the real estate taxes. We're okay. Obviously our interest rates are down now. So, you know, going into those banks that were giving me the higher rates is not a problem right now. We're going to be okay. I don't think we're going to need to do any revenue anticipation notes of any sort right now. But this is definitely a test for us when we do go out and borrow money with Moody's. I know a lot of other communities who are strapped for cash have the reserves. They're able to tap those reserves. I know we discussed this the other night when we met with the warrant committee. Again, we don't have those reserves to tap.
And I think at this point the general approach is muddling through for the next 3 months. I mean, I think that's what we have to focus on. There's already talk of another round of federal action, and something I read yesterday or today, I think people are bringing to the attention of the federal government the concerns municipalities have had and the impact this is going to have on municipal and state governments. And so it may well be that the next round of money printing will be directed more towards state and local government. And obviously there's a trickle down effect for us, even if it's not directly going to Medfield, and it gives the state more liquidity. They're in a better position to provide assistance to get us through. I think everybody has a realistic picture of where we are, and we're trying to avoid any sudden movements and avoid doing anything that's going to have a more permanent effect than it has to. I don't think we're yet back into the 2008, 2009 days of, extend, amend, and pretend. But I think at this point, we just kind of slip through here and see what happens and make sure there's nothing happens that we can't correct, fix, make up, compensate for on the back end.
And whatever it is, we have to make it up by June 30th. Or else our free cash will get reduced by that. The other thing that I want to say is the governor did mention that he is committed to the June 1st date, that it will not be beyond June 1st, which for every municipality is very important. We have teacher summer payrolls in June. We pay our retirement ahead of time in June. People try to empty out their budgets in June, which we're not going to do because we're going to put a somewhat of a freeze. But he has committed to that June 1st date. So we're just waiting for that to be signed, and we can make some plans and go forward.
Thank you, Georgia. Anything else on that topic? Okay. Next item is Sarah, Town Planner, requests the Board of Selectmen sign the following. The vote to approve, Medfield Meadows regulatory agreements. There's two of them, one for the rental units, one for sale.
That's correct.
Did we not, I know I've read these. Did we not already approve these?
You've approved several regulatory agreements over the past few years.
No, for Medfield Meadows.
You've read them, but they were supposed to be on the agenda right when everything happened.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay. So see, I got my 72-page packet, and I said, boy, I got a lot of reading in the next 2 days, and I don't have any time to do it. And then when I pulled it all up, like 65 pages or something. And as I got to the first 3 pages of it, I said, I've already read this once. So I was ahead without knowing it. That's good.
Yep. So these documents, in addition to being reviewed by Gus, they have been reviewed by Attorney Sorrell. And he did include some language that is in that version of the document. The documents have been approved by DHCD, signed by the developer. It needs a signature from the chair of the Board of Selectmen before being signed by DHCD and then being recorded at the registry.
Okay. So we just need a motion to approve and then for me to sign it, just the chairman.
Correct.
I second.
All those in favor?
Oh, you got to take a roll call.
That'll be a roll call.
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Marcucci,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
Peterson, yes.
It seems so unnecessary when we're all on video and we see each other. When it's just audio, it makes it, you think of roll calls. So that's for both of those documents.
Yeah, rental and ownership units.
Okay, the second bullet here was a housing choice MOU for ADA planning, and I didn't see that in the packet, I don't think.
I actually pulled it from the packet after reviewing it with Sarah. It's actually something I need to sign, so I pulled it from your packet and I'm authorizing myself to sign.
The coup is starting.
Just for the record, I'm the only one in the building right now.
That's right.
Christine, I think Christine's information is on there because she's the ADA coordinator. And it's really a short-term MOU because Nick actually kicked off the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan work last week. So we're already
Okay,
on
so
the way
that
on
one's
that.
off. So that one's off the list.
If we can just go back, I'm sorry, we actually had a revision to the agenda tonight. And it's something we're gonna add going forward. And it's just to discuss our COVID-19 operations and actions. It's actually why I asked the chief to be on the meeting tonight.
Okay.
So I apologize. There are two things that came up under this. We were hoping that the governor, the legislature would have acted on the governor's proposed bill and that we'd be making some decisions about that. Unfortunately, they haven't acted, so we'll have to hold that to our next meeting, but there will be some local actions that the Board of Selectmen will have to take. But there was a concern about Medfield State Hospital, and I just wanted the chief, I know she sent you a letter today, but I wanted her to speak about that. She did talk to the Board of Health on Friday.
Thank you, Christine. Gus, I also saw the news article that you referred to at the start of the meeting tonight. I thought it was a very positive piece and it kind of echoed my sentiment from a law enforcement perspective. First and foremost, I want to commend the residents in Medfield. They have really risen to the challenge of abiding by the governor's orders as best they can under very trying circumstances. So they've made my job a lot easier in that regard. But I think from both the law enforcement perspective and perhaps a more personal one, you know, we are embarking in very challenging times for people. There's a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety. People are home. They're out of work or wondering about work, about school. I think there's no element in our society that has not been impacted by this pandemic. And with that creates, it can create a lot of stress, anxiety, and tension within the home. So I think it's important for us to continue to give our residents an area that they can get out and get some exercise and some fresh air. I know the state hospital, ironically, as we had our most recent town meeting and we talked about what were we going to do with it, there were proponents of that really wanted us to keep it as an open space. And the irony of it is we now find ourselves enjoying that luxury. So the article on TV revolved around our high school students, mostly seniors, going up and enjoying a sunset and being able to have some socialization in a safe manner. That's an area that my officers and I have been able to monitor and make sure that they are using the guidelines as set forth in the order, and for us to bridge a lot of important gaps with them in terms of just communication. It's given us an opportunity to go up and really talk to our youth in a positive way and talk them through some of the stresses. So I think that right now the state has continued to allow state parks and facilities to be open. And I would encourage the town to continue that by allowing the state hospital to be available to its residents. And that's something, you know, that can be changed moving forward. I would caution that if we eliminate this as a viable avenue for people to go and get some exercise for their mental and emotional well-being, that I don't think the socialization will stop. I think it will be displaced. And my fear is that it will be displaced into areas that are more difficult for us to monitor, and the unintended consequence may be that we actually have greater exposure of the disease to people, not the virus to people, not paying attention to the social gathering laws, social distancing, but we also might see an increase in our nuisance crimes.
Thank you, Chief. Any reactions or comments, Peter, Mike?
I guess I'll just mention that I'm concerned about the increase in the virus, and that I think that we're in for a very bad time. And so that I think that the more physical distancing we can do as residents is the better we are for the long run. I think the next several months are going to be very tough.
I agree, which is why I think it's very important for us to continue while the governor gives us guidance through his healthcare advisors. The fact that they have maintained our state parks as being open facilities for people to be able to go to unenclosed areas and safely gather is pretty good guidance for us. I think the longer that this, the more prolonged this isolation becomes, the more likely that we're going to see an increase in some civil unrest and some disputes within the family. So anything we can do to stave that off right now in order, have a bit of respite for our residents is a good thing. I know there have been a few minor complaints about perhaps, some unruly behavior. We have increased our patrols up at the state hospital on an hourly basis, 24 hours a day to try and discourage that activity. But I think that there has to be a balance as well in understanding that these are kind of some real nuisance crimes that we can handle versus if we displace people and we force them to other locations that are not quite as visible, we might have problems that we can't control as well.
Chief, how are your officers dealing with the physical distancing issues? Because there are times when you need to get close to people. Are you guys doing okay?
We are. We've taken some extraordinary measures, and I only say extraordinary because these are extraordinary times for us. We've taken some extraordinary measures in how we operate our disinfecting and sanitation of the building. Our socialization amongst one another has obviously changed. I think the men and women in the department have really risen to this challenge, and we found that the community as a whole has been very responsive. We are asking people if they call us with a complaint, if it's something that is minor that we can take over the phone, we're happy to do that. And that's really for the safety of the community as well as our officers. If they do need us to respond, we are asking people if they're willing to step outside and talk to us so that we can engage in some fresh air and social distancing. But of course, we're going to have some circumstances that require us to put our hands on people and come into close quarters. And we're taking all available precautions that we can at this time, given the PPE that we have available.
To dovetail on what the chief said as far as alternatives for recreation, I understand, I don't know for a fact that the trustees had closed down public access to their various properties.
They have.
They have. I'm sort of disappointed that they did that. I would have understood them closing their buildings. I think Mass Audubon did something slightly different. They did a similar closure, but they put a statement out that said, we recognize there are people that are close to our trails. We understand that people will be using our trails. We just ask that you respect, kind of leave no trace sort of an attitude. Don't do any damage, maintain social distance. It seems to me the trustees should have done something similar, but perhaps some of their sites don't lend themselves to being able to just leave that open. My guess is that there's some dog walkers that are still using the trails up at Rocky Woods.
I will say this past week, Christine and I decided to take a ride up to the state hospital together and kind of a combined and unified front to be out in the community and talk to people and assess the visitation and whether people were abiding by the governor's order. I was very pleased to say that people not only were maintaining appropriate social distancing, but we saw no groups that were larger than 6. And it seemed overall that it was a really positive experience for the community. it was nice to go out there with Christine and be able to engage some people and just reassure them that we had a presence within the facility as well.
Also gave me a chance to walk off one of those lunches, just saying.
But that explains why you went in the ladder truck where the chief was at one end of the ladder and you were at the other end of the ladder.
We actually did drive up there separately, just so everybody knows.
Okay. Well, I on the issue of, you know, the State House, first, Chief, I endorse your view. I endorse your rationale behind that view. Maybe the only thing I would add, I believe that the Board of Health has commented about the beneficial effects of sunlight and fresh air. And so even beyond just the mental health issues, there's probably some physical health issues. There's one more thing I think I still believe in this town matters, and that's that as a town, and I'm not saying this happens with 100% of the citizens, but as a town, we trust the citizens as a whole to act responsibly, to listen to reasonable requests, and we trust them to do that and use their judgment to do it. So the idea that we're not going down a coercive path of closing things up or forcing people to do things in the absence of clear evidence that we have some problem that's blossoming that requires that. I think for this town in particular, maybe not all towns in the state, but for this town in particular, it's appropriate for us to basically tell the citizens why they need to do what they need to do, but then set up circumstances where we demonstrate we trust them to do it. Yeah, it's not going to be 100%, but it's a pretty high percentage. From what I can tell, I've been driving around, I've been walking around. From what I can tell, it's a very high percent of people. And as I started off this meeting, including young people who understand, who are acting responsibly and are doing what they believe the best they can to help make sure this is no worse than it needs to be. So the trust we have in our citizens and their reasonableness, I think, is something we should still be relying on.
I agree. We have had a tremendous amount of cooperation and support from the community. These times that our officers have gone out, if there were groups of people together and engaged them to educate them on the order, there's been no resistance whatsoever. I think it's just a matter of continuing to get the word out. Obviously, this is a very fluid situation, so the governor's orders are changing on a daily, sometimes hourly basis, and we are trying to get that information out to the public, as well as I know the town has updated information regularly on the website. If there are a couple things I would encourage people is that if you have questions pertaining to COVID, we would ask that you call or look into the town website prior to calling the police. We are attempting to keep all of our lines open and available for emergencies. There is a screening process in place. If you call the police, please don't take offense to the fact that we are going to ask you a series of questions so that we can best determine what type of PPE we need to wear in order for us to serve you. And for the most part, I think we are seeing people really bond together over this. For those few people who would take an opportunity to instill fear or hate, I think this town is very quick at dismissing that. So we're very fortunate from a law enforcement perspective, and I am anticipating continued cooperation.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, next item I had on the agenda, unless there's more new items, Christine.
Nope, that was the only one.
Okay, all right. The Board of Selectmen are requested to vote to approve the health insurance renewal and authorize Town Administrator Christine Trierweiler to sign the renewals. That's the MIA paperwork I believe we had.
Correct. That's a health insurance increase, which is a 3.48% increase.
Yeah, why does the letter say it's a 2.8% decrease? Or is that the liability and workers'
Property and
comp?
liability, yeah. Because the health insurance is 3.48.
Okay, okay, and that didn't have any paperwork with it either then, huh? Or it did, maybe it was just out of order.
I think it may have been better, but you should have that.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
You're right, 3.48%.
Yep.
And so we are just entertaining a motion to authorize you to sign it.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
clerk, roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. Marcucci,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
Peterson, yes.
Okay,
And
pass.
I have officially signed it.
All right. Next
That's-
item, the Board of Selectmen are requested to vote to approve renewal for workers' compensation insurance and property general liability insurance and authorize Town Administrator Christine Trierweiler to sign renewals. I will simply comment that the cover letter says this is supposed to be returned by March 18th. I assume they've extended the deadline.
We did. Nick called and got us an extension.
Okay.
So moved.
This was the 2.8% decrease.
Yes.
Second?
A second.
Thank you.
Mr. Marcucci,
Yep.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
Peterson, yes.
Okay, and as we're watching signatures live on Medfield TV, if you're tuned in. Finally, Board of Selectmen are requested to vote to approve the letter with T-Mobile regarding the Mount Nebo Water Tower lease negotiations.
Yes, I will let Nick update you on this.
Sure. Negotiations have been ongoing with each of the three carriers that bid on Mount Nebo, and Mike Verizon is not included in the three here. T-Mobile has asked that we just execute a letter just stating that negotiations are ongoing. Both parties intend to extend until we finalize the lease, which we're pretty close. We're just going back and forth on one last component of it.
Okay. Motion to, again, Christine signing this one again.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Marcucci,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
Peterson, yes. And could I ask, do we have people on top of the State Hospital water tower at this point running up there?
Verizon has an agreement with the town and is actually emailed us today about starting construction. And then we bid for the state hospital again this year with Nebo going out. AT&T was awarded, and they are working with us on the lease now, and they're finalizing some site specific issues. So hopefully by the end of this year, AT&T and Verizon should be up there.
Yeah, everybody says Verizon could use the extra spot to improve the service.
I think everybody would agree with that.
Okay. Anything further on the, we had a joint meeting with the warrant committee, last night, but anything further on the capital budget or the annual town, either annual budget, capital budget, or town meeting warrant articles?
I think just a brief update, just to follow up from the meeting last night. The financial team worked today. They're running scenarios, multiple different scenarios on capital that we talked about last night. We're also working on the budget and anticipating what cuts may or may not need to be made. So we probably have 4 or 5 different operating budget scenarios and 2 capital budget scenarios that we'll present to the capital budget committee next week.
Okay. Any other comments, Peter, Mike? Seems
Nope.
like we're kind of in flux. No. Okay. Town administrator update.
I just have a couple of small things. I've given you most of what I had. I just wanted to stress, we talked about at the last meeting, just that we are continuing, and our goal is continuity of government operations. This next week, we will start meter reading. We're currently doing the fire hydrant flushing that's ongoing. Then we will start our meter reading program, and we will, unfortunately, bad timing in sending them out, but we'll be sending out our water bills. Recognize that everybody's home right now and using a little bit more water than they probably would normally for a winter reading. We're also continuing our street sweeping program, and DPW is going to start some of their road projects as well. We're currently staffed fully on DPW. Even with our shift rotation, we can begin some of those projects. And actually it's beneficial to them with everybody home. There's a little more room on the roadway for them to get them done. So when you see them out there, they are continuing those projects in consultation with the Board of Health. We had some concerns about the street sweeping program. We talked to the Board of Health, who fully endorsed keeping moving on that project.
Okay. That's it for that. Next meeting date, we're currently scheduled for next Tuesday, the 7th, I believe, for our next meeting.
The 7th will be the quad meeting date, I believe we're referring to, where we're going to meet with the school committee, the Dale Street committee, and the warrant committee to go over the grade configuration ideas for Dale Street. We may
Okay.
have a small number of items to take up that night for the Board of Selectmen. We can save those to the end of that meeting and just continue as a Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Okay,
I'm available for all of that, Christine. So at any time between like 5:30 in the morning and 11 at night on the 7th that you'd like to schedule that select meeting, I'm available.
We might just continue Zoom. It's much easier for me to get everybody in one place.
well, Christine had me yesterday afternoon before the joint warrant committee Board of Selectmen meeting. I checked our town agenda. And if you'll see this, if you go to the Board of Selectmen meeting, it identifies the Board of Selectmen meeting in the Chenery Room, which I assumed wouldn't be the case. But then I went to the warrant committee agenda and it referred to the members of the public who could dial in, but identified the location as the Chenery Room. So I sent Christine an email saying, gee, this is interesting. I didn't realize we were having a physical meeting at the town meeting. I'm going to have to get out of my pajamas. And she promptly emailed me back to say, no, don't come. It's a Zoom meeting, and gave me permission to get back in my pajamas. So this is a dress shirt for the record.
I do want to commend the assistant town administrator on his appropriate dress for this meeting.
Yes. A dapper assistant town administrator we do indeed have. Yes. I think he needs a town of Medfield fleece with the little emblem though. That's
He doesn't qualify for the emergency fleece yet. He's got to be here at least a year.
As long as it's not a razor, I'm happy.
Now, if for those of you who do have video, you'll see that both Christine and Georgia have, and I'm pretty sure you need one of those in order to enter the town hall under the current conditions. So just for the record, that's how you get into town hall, is you get your hands on one of those with that big emblem on it.
Mine is borrowed. It says elections.
We do have them coming for essential personnel for our Zoom meetings. I will tell you
Okay.
that a panelist has just suggested we get Town of Medfield baseball hats. So
Oh, for Nick, just for Nick, just for Nick. Is that the one that has the moose antlers on it, or is it just the Medfield thing? All right, okay. We only have one more thing to get through. We can do this. Selectmen reports. Mike.
I can report excellent social distancing going on in the runs I've gone on over the past week. Everyone's giving themselves a lot of room. Randy Carr getting a lot of work done on his lawn. I run by his house on my runs, and he's accomplishing a lot out there. But anyway, we said this every time. I did want to continue to commend the town employees who are keeping everything open, and our police and fire who are still on duty. And every time I hear the lights going by my house, which is frequent given where I live, I'm just reminded that they all have a new risk that they are dealing with at this time that they weren't 6 weeks ago. And so I'm appreciative of their efforts and the efforts of the DPW to keep the transfer station moving and keep everything running and everything going smoothly. I think of all the people affected by this in the world, we're fortunate to be here in Medfield and have some space to be around and have a well-functioning government and everything taken care of, and people can focus on their families and focus on their businesses and trying to keep their businesses together and moving forward, which is a challenge for a lot of us, regardless of the size of the business that you're and for which you have some responsibility. So thank you to Christine and Georgia and Nick. And I think Yvonne might be gone, but I know she was listening in, and Chief Garrett is gone, but thank you to the chief. And again, reiterating as well, my thanks to the Board of Health. It's a new Board of Health that we appointed last summer on the promise of monthly meetings, relatively low-key activities, nice group, not a lot to do. You can make a contribution to the town without much of an effort. And now they're on emergency teleconferences who themselves, many of them are on the front lines dealing with these health issues. So again, thank you to them for stepping up. And we're really fortunate to have such a talented and experienced group of people who actually know what they're talking about. So it's good to have, and we're appreciative to them. And I do see Carol is listening in. So Carol, thank you to you as well.
Thanks, Mike. Pete?
So I read in the Globe today, Gus, that I shouldn't have succumbed to the annoyance of my long hair because I cut my hair myself. And they said that you shouldn't do that because of the Zoom meetings that are coming your way. So it was too late. But
So
so
from what I said, Pete, you did a great job. You look great.
I thought I was pleased with the way it came out until I read in the Globe that I shouldn't have done it. And then so I have a disagreement with the Globe, I guess.
Well, Pete, we bring our dog to Four Paws and they're also closed. So it's like, that's not an option either.
Yeah, I'll go in on a clipper with you, Gus. I get to go first. The dog gets to go second.
It comes with the bath. It comes with a bath and shampoo, Pete.
You can't share utensils.
So I would second, Mike, your commendation to the town officials. I think that it's been impressive the way that Chris and Nick and George and the rest of the people have stepped up and run the town during this unprecedented, just unimaginable situation. So I'm very appreciative to all of you. I would just mention finally that we lost a very highly involved citizen in the town in the last week or so. Mike Stanley died, and he had been involved in just about everything when I first started coming to town. And he was a very, very active citizen in the town of Medfield for a long, long time. And that's it.
I wish I should have given you some time to bring that up at the start of the meeting, Pete. Thanks for letting everyone know. I guess two items. One, well, actually 3 items. Pete, when I heard a rumor that the governor was going to shut down barbershops, I went over to Dave's, I think like a day or two before he got, I actually saw him late on Monday when he was sitting by himself in the barbershop. I stuck my head in because I was going to Brothers and I said, "Are you going to be open tomorrow?" He said he was. So I got a haircut proactively like a day or two before barbershops got cut down, figuring I can get out to June before I have to go to the poodle groomers. 2 things. Last Saturday, I took a walk over the state hospital too. I've been wandering around, totally non-scientific and non-organized, but looking to see how people are doing. And I can attest on a 2-hour walk with my dog that I don't know whether it's the dogs that keep people apart or the people that keep the dogs apart right now, but there was probably not much less than 100-yard distances between the people that were over there at the time I was over there, which was good to see. I have one other item, and this is actually a question for Pete and Mike, a matter of parliamentary procedure, I guess. Last year, I think it was the day after our election, we had a Board of Selectmen's meeting, and I kind of was caught by surprise when we went through the rotation of who became, and I became the chair of the Board of Selectmen. So we moved the election from yesterday out into May, but it struck me that that probably doesn't automatically follow that the rotation of the chairman of the Board of Selectmen needs to follow the election that way. So I actually was looking to the 2 of you for your thoughts and advice, but it occurred to me either we should elect, reorganize our Board of Selectmen tonight before we close, or if it's easier, we can know that that's a vote that's coming next Tuesday and do it there. Or if for some reason in the town charter it says this can't happen till after the election, then I understand I have to wait. But at any rate, it seemed like the rotation was due, and I just wanted to figure out how we might best do that.
So my sense is that we're supposed to be sitting at the table and get up and move around. And since we're not sitting at the table and we haven't had the election, my thought was that you should continue as the chair until we have the election.
Okay, I'm obviously willing to do that, but wanted to make, hey, Pete, first, I'm guessing you would probably be the one that would be most important to know what you'd like to do. So I'm happy to do that if that's the consensus of the 2 of you. But I'm also happy to I just didn't want to dump it on somebody like it got dumped on me a year ago. And I also didn't want to ignore the issue. So
It
Like
does seem
your-
very abrupt when it happens, doesn't it?
Oh, the first, I mean, now I know how the game is played. I'm okay, but that was only my third year as a selectman, and I guess it hadn't really crossed my mind when it happened. I kind of knew that that's how we did things, but I hadn't quite expected it to be less than 24 hours after the election was over. That's all. So, Mike, your
Yeah, I agree with Pete. And it's not only because with the Zoom meetings, the clerk has to do all these roll call votes, which makes the job a lot harder. My thinking on it was totally a function of signatures, because the chairman has to sign a lot of stuff, and
Okay.
whether it would be harder to switch signatories and all that. So I think if Pete
Okay.
is fine with the status quo, I'm fine with the status quo.
Okay. Well, for the record, let it be known
The
that
third
if
member is
I,
the best gig.
okay, right. Well,
I'm happy to continue for the next 2 years.
that factored into my thinking a little bit, Mike, but for the record, if my two fellow selectmen feel that I am about to run the town off the rails between now and May 5th, I will defer to their demand that I step down and allow an election to find a more fit chairman for the Board of Selectmen for the next couple of weeks. So, okay. I don't have anything else.
I actually have two things. Carol Reed just reminded me, I wanted to give you a heads up that the Board of Health last Friday, we approved the request from Norfolk County Mosquito Control to start their spraying, which will begin in April. One thing we don't want to do is postpone that and lead ourselves into another public health crisis. I think one at a time is about all we can handle right now. So they're going to start spraying in April. We will notify everybody and let everybody know when that is going to begin. But the Board of Health did vote to begin that process.
Okay.
And the other thing, I had promised Mo that I would just remind everybody the transfer station is open on Sundays. Saturday is still proving to be our busiest day. I know this past weekend we had some traffic out onto North Meadows Road. Come visit us on Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. If we can try and expand when people are using it, we can better do our social distancing and physical distancing at the transfer station. So come see us tomorrow.
From having visited the transfer station and observed a lack of physical distancing, it just occurred to me that maybe it might behoove them to put a cone in front of every other space so that people are forced to social.
So we actually, Mo and I met today and went over some initial plans. I know Gus is going to go out and take a look at it based on some comments we had over the weekend. We're trying the best we can. We're not really having an issue on Wednesday and Friday. So if people can come out on those other days, we would appreciate it. Everybody seems to be home already, so it'd be perfect. We'll get your trash before the weekend.
Okay. If there is no further business, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Marcucci,
Yep.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
Peterson, yes. Good night, everybody.
Very
Good
good
night.
night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Appearance of your child.
Take care.